So, Jared, it's almost 3 years now since we've launched the Word on Fire Institute. And a lot of people ask, for one thing, how did this all get started? So I thought that would be a good place for us to start, is to talk a little bit about how the Word on Fire Institute came to be.
Yeah, and it's crazy thinking that it's already been 3 years since we launched. But so we have to go all the way back to really 2014, or I guess if you really want to go as far back, it's Cardinal George being kind of the godfather, the grandfather of Word on Fire itself. He's the one that challenged Bishop Barron, which was actually a direct challenge from John Paul II to Cardinal George. And then Cardinal George went to Bishop Barron to start what he started, which is Word on Fire. But back in 2014, I was invited to a meeting in Chicago. At the time, there was about 8 employees with Word on Fire, to sit down with Cardinal George about thinking through where is Word on Fire going to be in 100 years. And Cardinal George specifically said that and kind of challenged us to say, this has to continue. This work is too important to see it end at any point. And so we actually spent about a year and a half in discernment. I was pleasured to, or honored to be invited into a close-knit group of people within Word on Fire. At the time, I wasn't with them on staff just yet. But we've prayed through the Acts of the Apostles for well over a year with monthly calls and just kind of thinking through what is God asking us to do. And so the language, and of course Bishop Barron mentions this in his book with John Allen Jr., of moving from a mission to a movement. And so we were discerning what that looks like, and of course Bishop Barron has this great grand vision of Word on Fire priests, lay consecrated, but we had to take about 10,000 steps back and say, what's step number one? Mm-hmm. And the reality that a brick and mortar building at the time wouldn't necessarily work for us because we were already an international reality due to Bishop Barron's preaching and great success in that world. So it came about because we felt this great need to further the formation that Bishop Barron was providing in a much more systematic way. And so we launched the Institute to be able to reach our international demographic through specialized courses and numerous other aspects that I'm sure we'll get into, that to deepen the understanding of Word on Fire's ethos of how we evangelize.
So you personally were involved with Word on Fire before being an official or formal employee of Word on Fire. You were very much involved with the ministry in the years preceding your more formal affiliation. And I remember reading your blog posts, which is kind of a weird thing, now having gotten to know you so well. And if I remember right, there was a lot of blog posts about masculinity and the faith, and athletics, and the importance of training the body as part of training the whole person. And obviously that was something that people needed to hear. Your involvement with Word on Fire was an important one, even as a blog contributor. And then suddenly you find yourself actually hearing the voice in the same room of Cardinal George, who most of us, myself included, have never met. That must have been quite an experience to actually be in his presence, knowing that the sort of lineage goes even beyond him to now Saint John Paul II.
Yes.
What was it like to just be in the same room as Cardinal George?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely being in the same room as a saint. In one sense, because he is such an intellectual giant. I mean, realizing what this man knows, the experiences he's gone through, but then in the other sense, a more mystical reality of when you talk to him, much like what you hear about with Padre Pio or Mother Teresa, it's almost as if they're kind of peering into your soul a little bit, you know? But not with any animosity, but with pure charity of trying to better know you personally. And that to me was something that just really struck me when sitting down with him he doesn't know me from, Joe Bob, right? But he really wanted to get to know all of us and really was interested in knowing what these young people had to say about the future of the church and the future of Word on Fire. So knowing that he's now interceding for us is incredible. But and right around the same time, of course, we started thinking about what courses we wanted. And of course, your name came up almost immediately. And so I think I reached out to you maybe late 2017, I think is when everybody started talking, initially just about filming some courses.
Yeah, I was, it was right before Christmas. It was early December, and we were celebrating an early Christmas with my in-laws. So we were driving from the plains of Saskatchewan to Alberta, just pretty near the edge of the Rocky Mountains, just to give a little bit of a picturesque description of what we were doing. And yes, it was snowy out. Because it's the Great White North and it's wintertime. And I remember we took a pit stop because we had a little baby, little Anna, who's now 7, at the time, needed to stop. We pulled over on the side of the road, and I looked at my phone, as we tend to do nowadays when we pull over on the side of the road, looked at my phone to get caught up on my emails, and I saw an email from this Jared Zimmerer guy who I didn't know personally, but I knew your name from Word on Fire. And in it was this sort of introduction of this vision you had for the Institute and your interest in having me come on board just as a fellow, like a part-time or like a fellow to come in, film a course, and really that would be the extent of my involvement. At the time, I had no idea that it would lead to a full-time contract with Word on Fire as a consultant. And so that led to a phone call, I think, the next day, where you were just going to explain to me over the phone what the Word on Fire Institute was going to be, and what you had hoped I would do with this course, which was going to be based off of this book I had written for Catholic Answers in 2018 on how to reach the indifferent. And that conversation, I think, lasted a little longer than we both thought. And we realized that we get along well, and that we understand evangelization and the secular condition of the culture in much the same way, and how we ought to reach the culture in much the same way. And so unbeknownst to me at the time, that would lead not long afterwards to a job offer. And I've been with Word on Fire now for, well, I guess over 3 years now.
And I always laugh about that initial conversation because I'm showing up with my y'alls, and I'm thinking about this whole idea that we've got here, and you've showing up with your boots and your
got my Tim Hortons in my hand, and my pet polar bear sitting outside waiting to take me down to the hockey rink for another game of hockey. But that was quite the interaction, and a friendship too, which is really what we experience here in the Word on Fire office now. There's now many more here than just the two of us, and very much I think the fruits that we've seen that have grown out of the Word on Fire Institute have a lot to do also with the relationships that we build with one another here, not just as co-workers, but co-evangelists and brothers and sisters in the Lord. And that makes for a powerful missionary impulse that comes out of this institute.
It really does, and it's been incredible to see some of the successes that we've had as an institute, and we always see this as kind of God's providence moving us forward, and we want to be part of the solution to the problem. We want to legitimately see our mission as bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to a very hurting world. So whenever we talk about our successes, there's kind of two aspects to that. One is, of course, the material success that is necessary for us to continue the mission. But then also there's the spiritual pieces, which in many ways is like the parable of the sower, right? That we really sometimes don't see the seeds. But man, here at the office, we actually see quite a few anecdotally that we get to talk to some of our members, and we get to hear from them on some of the things that they're doing. So it's been incredible over the past, as you said, 2.5 years that kind of on the more material side, we've gotten a John Templeton Foundation grant that we're in the midst of completing, and we're actually working hopefully on a second one at the moment. And of course, the growth of the membership of the Institute has been just incredible. It actually has superseded so much of my expectations when we first launched, but it's provided us the ability to build infrastructure, to build something that's going to last, and so that we can continue to grow and continue to flourish and continue to provide things for people's formation and all of that. And we've grown the team now to the point where we have almost 9 full-time fellows and several part-time fellows, and of course we have almost dozens of other fellows that have filmed courses for us as well. And one of the things I had kind of, before we had this conversation, I was thinking back about some of the courses that we've filmed. It's been pretty incredible because, to me, our courses show an excellent picture of the ethos of Bishop Barron himself, that as evangelists, there's so many different avenues that we might need to take in order to actually reach the heart or create a condition for the possibility of the Holy Spirit to actually speak to the soul of the person that we're talking to, or the mind or the heart. And so for us, the topics can range from spirituality to social needs to philosophy, theology, apologetics, humane needs, literature. We've now got one that we're in post-production for on creative writing, really anything that we can do to help people. But I wanted to ask, what are a couple of the kind of like favorite courses that you've seen us launch over the years?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, and it really is. I've been thinking about that.
About that.
I can see in your eyes you wanted to say something, but we're on camera.
It's a bow.
Yeah, I wouldn't get away with saying about in front of you off camera, but anyways, I thought I'd call myself out there because now being in Texas, I hear my own accent all the time. It's hard to say which are my favorite courses, but there are some that stand out. I think I always go back to Matthew Petruzik's course on secularism, professor at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. He's just got not only a very insightful way of understanding the culture as it currently stands, both good and bad, and finding a way to pair those two things so you can clearly see a line between where we've gone wrong, but also where we're still on the right path. His content is great, but his presentation I find is just very engaging, and he's an affable teacher. You kind of you come out of it with a smile on your face, kind of thing. Like I don't know if he's trying to be entertaining or funny, but like there's something about him again that's winsome and likable, but also serious at the same time. So I really enjoy his course, both because of the content and the presentation. Jennifer Frey, philosopher out of the University of South Carolina, another excellent philosopher in her own right as an academic, but also has done some phenomenal stuff for us on happiness and the meaning of life, and so her courses is really great. Both Dr. Petruzik and Dr. Frey I've gotten to know personally, both on set doing courses with them, but also just getting to know them because they've been with us really from the beginning. The Institute as fellows, great people as well, and so their courses stand out to me. And I would say, like, aside from the courses, another offering of the Word on Fire Institute that I love, that's ongoing, and that I continue to look forward to every time new episodes come out, is the Bishop Barron Presents series, which you're the host of, and that's just been, the diversity of guests has been really impressive, and you always get such excellent insight and wisdom from those particular episodes.
And something we try to do with those episodes is, one, to have a good high-level conversation about important ideas that are influencing the culture and the history of ideas that brought us to where we are today. But the other way is to provide seeing the evangelist, Bishop Barron, speaking with someone who maybe he agrees or disagrees with, and having great dialogue. He's such a champion of good argumentation and good dialogue that really you get to watch it. You get to sit there and watch him have that dialogue. So in another way, we see that not only reaching the kind of popular culture in kind of an academic way, but also forming our own people on how does Bishop Barron have this conversation with people, whether he agrees or disagrees.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. And obviously, I'm interested to hear what your favorite courses are. But on top of that, a comment, and that is that it's important to see Bishop Barron, who has done so much to teach us how to evangelize, to actually do it himself. And I think, we can talk about this maybe after you talk about your favorite courses, but where are we headed now as really, we're not just here to produce media, we're here as a team of evangelists to get our feet on the ground and actually evangelize too. And so we've got this, we talk about fellows like Dr. Frey and Dr. Petruzik who have created courses for us, but they're tenured professors working in their respective universities. But we have fellows full-time that work out of this office that have some very exciting things coming up. So maybe we can get there eventually, but first, what are your favorite offerings so
I think one would definitely be Bishop Barron's course on John Henry Newman. This is literal, seminary level content that he's providing for people in digestible, way, just as he's known to do. Of course, we also consider John Henry Newman one of our great intercessors of our work here, and so really diving into his thought and understanding how he influenced even the Second Vatican Council and the need to see the sanctification of the world in a new and beautiful light. I just think that the Newman course does that really, really well for us.
It's worth mentioning too, just to interrupt you for one moment, that the context of that course when it came out was right around the time of the canonization of St. John Henry Newman. And that was an important time for the Institute because a few of us got to go out to Oxford with him where he gave a prestigious lecture in the very church on the campus of Oxford where Newman himself had given sermons. And so Bishop Barron is not just speaking purely from the intellect, but very much there's an experience of this saint and a friendship with this saint that really feeds into that course. So it is an excellent course.
Yeah. The other course I would say that really stands out to me is Father Paul Murray's, who has been a friend of Bishop Barron's for many years, and he's an Irish priest living in Rome. And
kind of a big deal.
Pretty big deal. I mean, he was a spiritual advisor to Mother Teresa herself. And so to learn from that man, especially the nature of that course, which is spirituality and our relationship with God and the act of abandoning ourselves to divine providence, what that looks like and what a prayer life looks like. I just think that is pivotal to how we operate as evangelists. If you're not praying, if you don't have a relationship with Christ, how can you give a relationship with Christ? So I think that course really does that well. But I would also say one of the other standout things that has occurred in the past 2.5 years is the publication of our journal, Evangelization and Culture. And of course we brought on Dr. Todd Warner to be the managing editor, who is now a good friend of ours, but with him and our design team has just totally knocked that thing out of the park. It's really a gem of the Institute, and I think one of the most beautiful publications that's being produced right now, to be completely honest with you.
And Todd would be the first one to deflect the praise onto the design team, Claire and Roseanne and Cassie and the content team and the other editors that are working with her, like Elizabeth and Matt Becklow and Dan.
Oh yeah, it's a whole team effort for sure.
Todd, so again, Todd would deflect the praise, but Todd Warner himself was somebody who came on board, who really technically didn't have a lot of experience as an editor of a high-level journal like this, and you could not tell. I mean, the guy from day one,
total pro,
was just a total pro. So.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about kind of where we're going. To your other question, a lot of the things, of course, now that, of course, COVID is hopefully starting to kind of lift a little bit, and we're starting to allow some in-person events, because unfortunately that reality kind of shut down several events that we had in mind. But now, moving forward, a lot of what we focused on so far is a more academic formation, more intellect, and of course spirituality as well. But now we really want to start challenging people to go. Let's start fulfilling this mission in your own lives, in your families, in your communities, in your schools, in your parishes, at the gym, wherever it is that you go. Bring what you're learning at the Institute into the world. That's how we sanctify the world. That's how we bring Christ to the world. And so something, especially with our fellow Joe Zambone, who's our fellow Word on Fire Communities, we've been talking a lot about in-person retreats that we'll be starting to launch, as well as some leadership formation and all of that, but then also some conferences that we're going to start putting on. In fact, we already have a few dates on the books for some in-person conferences. This is something that we've been kind of wanting to do since the beginning. Remember, we had the priest conference at the very beginning, before we even launched the Institute. It was that same year, September, before we launched. And we had 300 priests out on the beautiful coast of California for 3 days of homiletics, basically, with Bishop Barron, which was unbelievable. We were planning on having another one within like 8 months for laity, and it just totally got kind of messed up because of COVID. But it's just been an unbelievable growth towards that. But I think really now the Institute is providing the intellectual, the spiritual formation, but we've got to start getting people moving. And we see this, as I mentioned, in a lot of emails and communication that we have with our members, some of the things that are occurring. Beautiful stories of evangelization within their own families, around Thanksgiving table. They're more comfortable, they're more willing, they're more confident to actually talk about the faith. And to be honest with you, that's what we want to do. You know, we want people to know the faith so well and to have a certain style of language that, much like Bishop Barron's own ethos, they're able to do it comfortably. They don't have to overthink it. They don't have to, they can just it just becomes part of who they are, part of their language. And so what we want to do now is, and of course also on the academic side, we've got a lot of colloquiums planned. So we want to move into that world.
So we're bringing academics together to discuss certain topics, but from a more technical academic perspective.
Yeah.
Just to give people an idea of what a colloquium is.
Yeah, and not really from like an ivory tower type of thing.
Right.
It's more of, culture is downstream from ideas most often. And so for us to come together and kind of wrestle with these ideas, and then we can take what we learn from other academics and through these conversations and form our people in them. And then they take it to the culture. That's how it works. You know?
And sometimes the experts that we're consulting with and getting together with to discuss these important things like religious disaffiliation, for example, they may be authors, they may be catechists, like they're not always necessarily, a chair from some university. Right. One of the things I think we do well here is we recognize that there are gifts at every level of the church, from Catholics who are teaching at Ivy League schools to high school teachers, to homeschooling parents that have these certain kinds of wisdom, not levels, but kinds of wisdom that others can't offer. And so that's part of the way that we also develop our content here. We take our curriculum very seriously. And, whether it's a formal colloquium like gathering people, say, on a university campus to discuss certain issues at a high level that impact our mission as Christians, or whether it's maybe more informal digital type colloquiums like what we do in the forums, where we bring the tens of thousands of people that are currently members of the Institute into these different areas of the online forum to discuss things. That's also an important part.
Yeah, you see that range in our courses as well. We mentioned a few of our favorites, but there's also some very practical evangelization courses as well. I think immediately of Haley Stewart's in regard to living out the liturgical year in the domestic home. I think of Father Gadberry's, the people you'll meet in your work in evangelization. Yeah. Elizabeth Scalia's, she has one called 6 S's of Evangelization, which is phenomenal. So it ranges so much, as I mentioned, that we kind of go top to bottom, because as a good evangelist you need to know the intellectual, the kind of more philosophical realities, but then at the same time, what does that mean in reality? How do I take that and make it real? Yeah. Another thing I'm also very excited about is something that Holly Ordway and Joe Zamboni have been working on, which is peer mentor groups. So these are groups within the Institute, within our own forums, where they actually get more kind of one-on-one time with our own fellows to discuss kind of leadership, both digitally and in person. But then also we're going to start offering these seminars. Right now we're actually in the midst of a writing seminar with Holly Ordway, Holly Ordway is one of the premier professors of English literature today. And we actually have her teaching our people on creative writing and how to write well. And they actually get to even kind of send a few pieces of writing to her, and she gets to kind of critique it a little bit and stuff. And I mean, for what people are getting inside the Institute, that is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think your emphasis that you made a minute ago about how we're an outward moving institute, though an outward moving movement, in the sense that we are, it's fair to say we're media based. Right now, you'll find the Institute online. Yeah. But the Institute really, in the sort of way we understand the Catholic Church cannot be confined to a building.
That's right.
It's not a building. It's a body in the mystical sense, but also, in a more natural sense, it's people. Yeah. The Institute is people too. And so it's so important that we're now finally moving towards getting our feet on the ground, whether it's sitting across the table from people, whether it's speaking to a group of people, say in a conference setting, whether it's ministering to people one-on-one. That is so important. And going back to the priest conference that you mentioned that we had a couple years ago, that was an incredible experience. I was pretty new to Word on Fire. It was like baptism by fire, because Father Steve Bruno, the CEO of Word on Fire, who's been here from the beginning, basically said, just days into my time with Word on Fire, Matt, you're going to be emceeing with Jared this conference, and you're going to have to sit upstage. I had never met Bishop Barron before this conference, and I met him, and then I was asked also, along with you, to sit on the stage and do a live Q&A with Bishop Barron. So there's many memories personally from that conference of just getting to know people like Father Stephen, Bishop Barron, and you, spending time with you guys in person, but then also meeting the many great priests that were there, who were going out and really being that light in their own parishes and communities. And that's the goal, is for us to take what we're doing at the Institute, help equip people to proclaim Christ to the culture in their own local areas. And hopefully it's sort of like a passing of the baton from John Paul II to Cardinal George to Bishop Barron, through now us in the Institute who are leading, to our leaders who are outside, out in the world, and hopefully they'll continue to pass on that evangelical baton, as it were, and proclaim Christ. And hopefully the ripple effect, and undoubtedly the ripple effect, will go far beyond what we ever know or see.
Yeah, even now, I mean, it's
God's
been incredible
providence.
to see some of the work of Bishop Barron. You know, he just met with an archbishop from the Middle East, and he basically said, look, Word on Fire is the premier resource we use to teach the Christians and Catholics of the Middle East. And so, I mean, for us to know, or it's difficult sometimes for us to know, as I mentioned, the parable of the sower, what exactly is taking root. But we feel very confident. We feel very close to Christ and his saints. And we know that we're trying to fulfill the call of the Second Vatican Council, which is ultimately from that lineage. You know, and in order to do that, we're starting with lay people. We're getting them, as the Second Vatican Council teaches, out in sanctifying the world, bringing Christ to the world. But eventually, you know, Bishop Barron, as he mentioned in that book with John Allen Jr., the eventual hope is that we actually have our own priests. We have an order of priests for Word on Fire, and lay consecrated people for ourselves. And so we really want to see the ethos of Bishop Barron's work, the ethos of Word on Fire, germinating everywhere. And as you said, the term to proclaim Christ to the culture, that means you have to be in the culture. We've got to be in it, within it, but not beholden to it. Right? There's a difference,
which requires some wisdom.
That's right.
You know, knowing what parts of the culture to celebrate and what parts of the culture to be wary of, but then also how to put yourself, sometimes when the Holy Spirit leads you to do so, to put yourself within an area, say amongst people who are very unlike us as Christians, parts of the culture which some people will justly be wary of, and to have the wisdom to be in those areas, to be the missionary, to be in a missionary setting like that, and be able to really proclaim Christ to the culture in a way that's going to be compelling. And that's what we're trying to do. That's
what we're trying to do. Yeah, and for any of our viewers that are watching that aren't currently part of the Institute, we would absolutely love to personally invite you to come join us in there. You can check out all the courses that we get. Of course, you get the quarterly journal as well, and several other aspects of being an Institute member. We only got into a few here. So be sure to go to wordonfire.institute, and we would love to see you inside.